Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into the Odd Thoughts Podcast. At the Odd Thoughts Podcast, we like to talk about the everyday odd thoughts, have conversations on relatable topics, and discuss whatever comes to mind. My name is Gunther, and I am your host. Welcome to episode 43. For episode 43, I wanted to start off by talking about the idea of maturity, that through life you kind of gain a certain amount of knowledge and hopefully you can apply that to who you are and gain a certain level of maturity through that. Then I had a little fun talking about maybe what my dream home would look like one day. I'm always, my style is always changing in that way, but I one day will hope to own a home and get a chance to decorate it and make it look however I wanted to. Next, I wanted to talk a little bit about I wanted to talk a little bit about over explaining or the idea of over explaining. Sometimes you just have so much in your head that you want to share and you get some sort of anxiety with that because you just want to be thorough. So I can cause some over explaining and there are some ways you can do it, but it's not a bad thing necessarily. Lastly, I wanted to end it on an article that I had read that was talking about 20 of maybe the more popular kind of small cameos that movie stars have done in movies. Now, I don't think it's maybe necessarily the most popular, but some of them are pretty recognizable and pretty famous ones. And then I threw in a couple as well. So, if you want to listen to any of that, I appreciate y'all tuning in. Continue tuning in. Please enjoy as always. But how's everybody doing? I hope everybody's doing okay. Um, we're almost into February. We're a month so far into 2024. I hope things are going good for you so far. And I'm also hoping that we get into some warmer weather starting here in within a few weeks. It feels like January is really like the true winter month, you know what I'm saying? But, nonetheless, I hope everybody's doing okay. I'm doing my best. I'm trying to just figure things out as everybody usually is, as is never a stop in that pursuit for trying to figure things out. But I'm becoming more and more okay with certain aspects of myself. I really, I'm so hard on myself and I'm pretty tired from it. I really am. I just hate that I be looking at myself with such a heavy microscope for so often, for so long throughout the day, and I never really have a point throughout each day where I can feel good about myself or I really feel like I've accomplished something. And so I'm trying to do my best to do that. I involve myself with a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And if I can continue to do that each day, then I feel good about myself. Like I said, it's just tiring. I'm tired. My brain's kind of telling me that like, I don't have much more to give and I don't know how much I can take, and I keep telling myself that I just like I want to give up on certain things and I don't want to continue doing certain things, but my heart is like telling me something different. It's kind of like your head's tired, but your body's still so wide awake. It's conflicting and it makes me feel uneasy a lot of times. But I know with that reaction that my heart has, that I know that in deep down, I know that I'm able to do things. I know that I can. I know that if I continue to keep going, that I'm okay. I know that brings me a lot of assurance. And like I said, it's hard. There's so much mental aspect with your brain, right? It's things don't always come outside of it, and so a lot of things get built up inside your head. And I struggle with, I think, vocalizing things properly. And when things are built up, then everything on the outside of my life kind of like feel like they can poke at me a little bit. When I'm feeling super stressed and I got a lot of anxiety and I'm feeling depressed and things like that, then so many outside factors feel like they just come up to me and they poke me and just poke the bear, and I don't mean to react how I react, and I don't mean to be the way that I am, but I can't help it. The inside is where the struggle is. The outside, it's not doesn't look so great sometimes, but you can change the outside, but I got to change the inside first. It's just hard. I have people around me that love me. I have family, but I can only say so much, and I mean, it's like there's only so much I can share where before it gets too depressing, and I don't want to bring my kind of vibe onto other people too much. Even though I know they care and they're willing to listen, I have to deal with it one day in my life. I'm gonna be there for myself, always. And I'm not always. I feel lonely now. Like I said, not because I don't have family, but like I don't want to burden them, and I don't want to burden anybody, but like you have to have a support group. And sometimes I always think that I need like a new support group in a way, or like I need to go find some people in my life that can relate to me in certain ways. I just like, loneliness kills. I'm lonely 100%. I hate it. It makes me feel stupid and it makes me feel dumb, and every night it kind of sucks. But yeah, nonetheless, I'm doing my best to just be okay with myself. I got to be okay with myself first. I think that's the one thing that really stops me is like I'm just not okay with who I am. So we're working on that. But yeah, nonetheless, let's go ahead and hop into episode 43. Through the natural progressions of each of our lives, we will inevitably endure an infinite number of experiences, all which will shape who we are. We will have plenty of opportunities for life to put us through certain moments and offer up a certain amount of knowledge to show us how to continue our existence. Nothing is really clear and never really going to look similar to other people's lives. Within the knowledge, though, that we hopefully gain, we might also be able to access certain levels of maturity. Maturity is a result of the understanding we try to like conceptualize because of the many things we may endure as people. Maturity is not just one concept idea. It's kind of more of a varying way of accepting the truths of life. We search for a way to function through the ways we are, and life experiences will shape you. And all you really must do is just try to do your best to find intentions in who you are, and just try to take everything you learn and apply it effectively. That's kind of the whole thing with maturity is like there's no one big thing that says like, oh, you're maybe more mature than other people, or you might look at other people and say, well, they got kind of things put more together than I do. That doesn't really tell for everything that you go through. There might be things that you're kind of more capable of handling, and there's some knowledge that you'll come across that you're kind of better at processing than other things and than other people. And like we know that our lives are just not going to look super similar to other people's, you kind of just got to do your best to take what you know and apply it to yourself. And come to an understanding of ability to function properly through like the different aspects of your personality, and do your best to kind of integrate those patterns and behaviors effectively with hopefully little to no conflict. That's kind of the whole thing is like doing your best to kind of integrate proper patterns and behaviors, without having to hurt anybody or do any wrongdoing onto anybody else, or really bring any conflict onto you, I suppose. Like, you don't want to act, immaturity doesn't just affect other people, immaturity does affect you as well. You want to try to be a whole person capable of understanding purpose and intention in your own life concept, basically. I guess that's part of it, right? Not everything, I guess it's always big thing to say is like nothing is like a clear, outline for things, right? And things won't ever come like I think easily in that sense of like, oh, this is a very much so a sign, or this is very much so things that I need to learn. It's not always that easy. So when it happens, and if you can pick up on a little bit of this and a little bit of that, that's kind of like our responsibility really as humans, is that we kind of got to pick up things on our own. And we might miss the opportunity to understand something at first, but it's our responsibility to pick up on that stuff, and that's part of maturity. That's part of growing up in general, is not just you get older and you're mature by age. You got to realize the things that you've done. When it comes to immaturity, there's some sort of like helplessness that kind of comes with it. Maybe not necessarily that the person themselves is like helpless in nature, but you kind of betray a certain helplessness. You kind of say that you can't do it or you don't understand. It's something that maybe I'm even guilty of, truly. I say there's certain things I can handle in life for sure. There's things that I know and that I'm mature about, and that I really take wholeheartedly with the things that I've learned. But sometimes it is a little bit, I feel like I don't want to try something if I don't know nothing about it, or something is just gonna throw me through some sort of mental loop that I just feel like helpless. I feel like I just would rather take away that responsibility. Kind of in it doesn't mean I'm immature as a person as a whole, but sometimes there's certain responsibilities that I want nothing to do with, or like certain things don't have consequences, so it's kind of like it's like what's the point of doing it or something like that. You can kind of go on and just like skip over things and skip past knowledge purposefully 100%. Like I said, sometimes it's not clear when it comes through, but sometimes it's very much so. Like, it's very much so this is what you need to know now, and you need to like do your best to envelop that knowledge into yourself. So like, eventually, like I said, you're gonna have to learn life lessons eventually. And when it comes to that point where it's kind of like, well, you've been thrown a bone a few times, sometimes that if you consistent in maturity, you'll just ignore that. It's no responsibility, no consequences. I think when you're growing up, there's a lot of involvement in your cognitive development. The decision making and your judgment, your reasoning, your planning, right? That's stuff that has to develop. And so not everybody develops the same, and some people are better at that kind of stuff than others, but that helps a lot with maturity. It helps you, take in the things that you learn and say like, okay, well, this is why I need to know this, and this is the way to apply it to my life, or help you become a little more definitive on doing things. Also, like, judgment in the way of like a self judgment. You don't want to be super harsh on yourself, but it would be silly to say that you shouldn't have any sort of like, light down on you trying to like point out the wrongs. Like, it doesn't hurt to judge yourself a little bit. And, when there's other people who are, immature or whatever, it's pretty easy to judge them. I mean, it really is. I think there's no timeline to immaturity too. Like, it's just like who knows when people are going to be like mature. It's such a weird thing to kind of like define as a whole term to say like, this person is mature. In my life, like in my own experiences, like if I see someone who's a little more put together in their life and they kind of got things moving a little bit differently than I do, and it just seems like they're more content, I think that like betrays a certain maturity to me. But I mean, like, it could be a masking thing. It could be just, falling in the right situations. I can only really tell myself that, well, there's certain things that I know and that I really take seriously, and there's certain things that maybe I choose to ignore, or things I've never really certain concepts of life that have never really passed through me. So I just haven't became mature to certain aspects yet. As I think like a lot of people, like I said, that's what sometimes happens. Like sometimes things just kind of pass by you for a certain amount of time, and it's just like eventually it's going to happen, right? Eventually you're going to have to, as a person, even if you're, not necessarily blind, but something just hasn't popped up in your life, it's your due diligence to think of that, even if you don't know what it's like weird to say that. It's like to think of something that you have no concept of knowing what it is, but whatever. But the eventual goal is to become mature, to take in that knowledge, to take in the experiences, the consequences, factoring in your certain responsibilities and mature. That's kind of the whole point as you get a little older. There's no timeline to know like you could be a really mature 30-year-old, or maybe it takes you until you're 45, or maybe you're a 16-year-old that's got it all put together, or you're 7 years old and you've just never learned anything. I think I've met everybody. I think we've all kind of can maybe point out certain people along that spectrum. But maturity is a certain independence in life. It's not just like in the things you do independently, like living on your own or paying your bills, which is that's maturity. That's taking responsibilities for sure. But it's that independence in thought. Being able to make your own decisions and make your own judgments and have your own reasoning and plan your own things. That all takes into shape too with maturity. Like it shows that certain level. It's certain level of adultness, even though kids can be mature. I've met some pretty mature kids that are like, wow, you got it put together. You're 11 years old and you got it way way better than I do, at least inside your head. But you never know. Life can affect you in a different way, or whatever. I think it's just like when you come to like as an adult, when you grow up, you get to that certain age, it kind of shows like a certain level of adultness. I think that's when you kind of when you start to learn a couple more lessons and you start to feel a little more mature, or maybe people kind of let you know and they come to you with certain things and they trust you with certain things. It's kind of you feel a little more adult, like as I get a little older, I'm getting close to 30. I'm a few years away, but people trust me with my opinion a little bit, and I can give my opinion on things, and my knowledge has as I've learned things and I've applied it. So it's kind of showed me like I can do this adult thing, and obviously more will come as the road continues, but I'm doing it to a certain point. You kind of like eventually, like I say, it's you want that independence. So shifting away from that reliance or oversight by guardians or by anybody else that you've kind of been able to maybe bounce off of or rely on. I don't know. Like I think independence is a super important thing, and it's not like the one tell all of your life in the way that you're going to have to be dependable on certain things. You're not always going to be able to do things. If you get hurt, you're going to have to go to a hospital. And, if you want food and you don't have a farm, you're going to have to go buy food. So there's certain dependabilities, obviously. Independence is just a thing of like, it's a mindset more so. Having that, it's autonomy, like that kind of thing. Being able to have that free will of your own thought, being able to conceptualize things on your own. I think in with the maturing and as you learn life lessons, as it does with lessons being learned, you kind of get to have a better concept of self too, right? You kind of understand the things you can take and what you can handle, and emotionally how you conceptualize certain things and how you feel about certain things. I think that's all kind of comes with the maturing. And there's so many different ways. I think like just besides like these kind of basic ways of like, you just the broad term of maturing and like with knowledge gained, right? That's the whole thing. And that's how maturity happens. But there's different contexts, I think, in life where kind of maturity, pops up, if you will. Certain things like emotional maturity. I think that's something a lot of people talk about, right? Where you don't, lash out with your emotions as quite, often. You may still get mad, you may still get, sad or frustrated or super happy or whatever, but you're not like outrightly affecting other people through those emotions or hurting yourself in a certain way. There's like intellectual maturity, right? The thing of like, understanding certain concepts like with it comes to like political, that kind of goes under that same thing, or just like your own personal life with like having a job and paying bills or things like that. Or just like common logic as well, kind of, right? That's what I think about with like intellectual maturity is like logic, having just a knowledge ability. Like even down to like a social maturity. I think like, being able to interact with other people and create relationships, not necessarily always friendships, but just even acquaintanceships, showing that you can, responsibly talk to people and no matter how close you are, how far away you are from someone, you can properly handle yourself. It's so many whims to maturity in that way. Like, there's so many things. Like, that's why I say, like, someone could be, intellectually, mature, but they're not emotionally mature, or they're, sexually mature, but they're not necessarily like, intellectually mature, or what, it's just like whatever. It's the little things or whatever. It's like, but if you it's I think sometimes as people, when you feel like you don't know something, you feel a little immature in certain qualities of your life. Then when you see people who have a maturity or have like a certain grasp on that concept, it makes you feel like they are just exponentially more mature. I think ways that you can, up your maturity is it's hard because it just takes a process. It takes time. You got to learn. Like you got to be willing to, take hits and, do the things that you don't want to, and that's all part of it. Make the decisions that are hard and cast judgment when maybe wouldn't regularly. Reason the best you can. But responsibilities are I think a big thing that bring maturity. It's one of those things where when you stack your life up with certain things, and you work a job and you got to show up for a job, and you have a family, you got to show up for family, and just things like that are like, a responsibility not to affect others too. Maybe you're a little bit, emotionally immature. you could still be mature in the way of like, well, I gotta make sure it's my responsibility to not affect other those emotions or hurt someone else's feelings through my feelings or whatever. And with responsibilities, like when if you complete certain ones, that's great. But if negate certain, responsibilities or you don't complete them, consequences become, they happen. And, if you just kind of, it's the more that you negate certain responsibilities and the more you pass off certain responsibilities, the consequences just become more serious. You unfortunately need consequences to kind of show you how serious it is, how serious certain things in your life are, and how that, taking that knowledge, taking that maturity really means something. Like, I'm not, I always say I'm not the most mature person, but I try to do my best to know that life's going to teach me lessons, and I just got to keep taking on those lessons. And at first, I may not like it, and I may not choose to understand it, but I'm gonna have to eventually. It's only gonna do me best. That's just part of it. That's part of life, living. I've always want to become more self-reliant. I think that's what a lot of people want to be is, independent, self-reliant, benefit from having a sustaining life, your own self-sustaining life. So that encompasses all that. That encompasses having to do things on your own and, take the consequences as they come, make your own decisions. And like I said, when that knowledge comes along, heed it. Do the best you can. I think I don't really know. I think like you can develop all these little things, right? You can try to be better at interacting with others and do your best to try not to be so emotional and do your best intellectually with like having logic, and that all can help with maturity. I think over time, maturity maybe is reached in a certain plateau of logic. I think like maybe if you wanted to say that you reached a certain level of maturity, it comes with that certain cutoff of logic. Where not saying that you don't, then logic becomes a foreign concept, but you fully understand it just by nature. Like as soon as something happens in your life, as soon as some sort of concept, materializes through the things you've learned, you're already thinking about how to solve that, or you're already thinking about how you're affected and how how it may affect other things. And who knows how high the plateau is? It may take a lot of learning before you reach that plateau, especially if you're starting from below sea level. You know what I'm saying? Um, there has to be um, there has to be a certain shift to reflection in your thoughts. I think that's a big thing too, is when things happen, you got to kind of self-reflect and make a deduction through your own like things, through what you know and the knowledge you know. That if you when you're someone who's passively like kind of letting things bounce off, or maybe you're like, oh, this always happens because of these outside forces, that's not maturity. You got to kind of, even if it's like something that very much so isn't your fault, or like, it's not very prevalently your fault, you got to have that bit of that reflection where you're kind of like, well, how am I in this situation? How could I have avoided it? Da 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 da. Things like that. And hopefully we reach maturity by the times we become adults. That's a big thing, is like, you never know. Maybe even like things change in your life and things become kind of chaotic, and brain chemistry can change so much for people. And so, lessons are learned and they can be forgotten. I believe that very much so. But maturity at the base level of kind of what it is, the concept of maturity is that you take in everything that life offers. All these, harshnesses, the responsibilities, all the times you have to make a decision, you have to reason with yourself. Take in all that knowledge and apply it to who you are. Integrate it into the behaviors of, yeah, of how you act, and in the patterns of how you live, and make sure it doesn't affect you negatively or other people negatively. Always having that kind of self-reflecting thought. That's kind of what maturity is, I think. Just it's a long process, but it's a self-understanding and being able to conceptualize those thoughts of self. I love pondering the idea of what maybe one day my dream home would look like. I hope to one day be a homeowner. I talked about it in my last episode that, I would love to own a home. And, I have no shame in taking on like decrepit, falling apart, abandoned houses. I really have no problem with that. But I like to think about what something would become if I did take on like sort of project like that, or if I had like the ability to build my own home. I think that's pretty awesome. I play The Sims a lot. I play The Sims 4. That's the one that's currently out. But I mean, I played The Sims since the first one. And over time, I think like the building has gotten better. I think like the gameplay has kind of shifted from, I feel like it was very much so about the Sims, and then now it's kind of about the building in the Sims, at least in my opinion. And I think I kind of dig with that a little more. So sometimes I get to live out my dream, and I get to be my own property brother, and I'm the third one. And I get to do my own like, like house. And there's only so much you can really do in The Sims with like building and in design and stuff like that, unless you own like every single pack, which I don't. But I love thinking about dream house, like my dream house. Where, what would it look like? Maybe even like where it would be. And I'm like a I'm not really I don't vibe necessarily with the modern kind of look. I think like a lot of houses nowadays, when people build like kind of modern houses, new homes, there's a lot of like it's like it's boxy looking. At least like when you go from like you like say like from ground zero, and you're not like where you get a home and you renovate the bones type thing. It's like I'm talking about from ground zero. Some of them homes is ugly. I don't like that boxiness. I don't like that kind of that even like that. It's like an empty looking thing where it doesn't look like the outside has a lot of character. It tries to have dimensions, right? That's like kind of a thing with modern architecture, right? Is like dimensions. You want things to look like things are sticking out, and it's got shapes and stuff like that to it. But I don't really need all that. I don't need all that. One thing I think I kind of like about a lot of new homes or a lot of modern homes that I see is I kind of like the windows. I'm a fan of windows. I'd live in like full on just windows. I love that kind of stuff. The natural light and things like that. That's kind of the one thing I really like. And then when you get inside these modern homes, it's just more that it's that more of that modernness. And a lot of times it's like nowadays I feel like you see so many like neutral colors, or like it's like black, white, grays, and beiges or something like that. And I'm not into I don't want I don't mind like black. Like I kind of like darker woods, and I like the blacks, and I mean like so when I do create houses in like The Sims, that's usually how my interiors look. It's like dark wood paneling, wood walls, and dark counters, and it's all that good stuff. That's just the stuff I like, but I just like when you start throwing in grays and beiges, it's kind of like I don't dig with that. I'd rather have just like splashed like sometimes I can play with a little bit with like the maximalist style of like interior designing where it's kind of like throwing all colors at the wall. Kind of dig on that a little bit. I kind of like that. Certain rooms, I think like a bathroom and kitchen, you probably don't need a lot of colors. Like I'm not really thinking about having the most like people spend time in there, but I like it looking clean. I'd rather look at make it look simple. It's used for certain purposes, right? I'm not really hanging out in my bathroom. So as long as the toilet and the shower and the sink are good, then who cares what the rest really looks like? Same thing with my kitchen. It's like that's kind of a centerpiece for a lot of people's homes, and I want a nice kitchen, but it's not like that's what I'm, hanging on. You know what I'm saying? I rather like the outside of the house look kind of nice, and I'd rather like the place where people sit, like the living room, to look kind of good, and in my own bedroom, because you want your bedroom to be a comfortable place, even if nobody sees it. You want it to be a comfortable place, so make it look while you want it, and make it look good, and make it look comfy. Do your thing. So that's my whole like. I just like I like. I think sometimes I think about when I look at like I go on Reddit a lot, and I try to look I like the mid-century kind of mid-modern look, that kind of 60s, maybe 50s, 60s, 70s kind of vibe. Wood paneling, I love that. Some of the colors are kind of like they're not vibrant, but they're like faded, and I kind of like that too. That's kind of my vibe. And then when you think about like structures like houses built in the 70s, like a lot of them are like they're like a mix of like sliding with like stone, or like, paneling with stone or something like that. And I kind of like that. I mean, you still get a lot of that stuff today, but I like that. And I always think like I don't need a necessarily a big house in the way of like a two-story building with, multiple rooms. Like I'd rather have like a one-story just like kind of long thing. I remember one time I built like I don't know what they're it's like part of like Asian culture. It's like these like homes where they're kind of in like L shapes. It feels like they surround like a courtyard kind of thing. And I like that a lot. I always thought like that would be kind of cool. Just have like a longer house that has that kind of that U-ish shape or whatever, and you can get around pretty easily. But then like all the rooms kind of surround each other in a way. I don't know. I kind of always thought that was kind of a cool idea. It makes it feel like everything's kind of enclosed and you can have your own little like maybe the courtyard is kind of the front entrance. I like that. That's kind of that's my vibe. That's definitely my vibe. And the question of where I would build my house, that's a big thing. I don't think I'm really picky on that. As long as like maybe I would try to go more with like the surrounding areas, you know what I'm saying? Like if I was like living out in the mountains somewhere, I'd probably lay right into that cabin vibe, you know what I'm saying? Try to build something that kind of sneaks into the forest or into the side of like the mountain or whatever. That's kind of because I wouldn't want it to stick out. Like if I was in nature, I'd want it to kind of blend with the backgrounds or like if you had like a cabin off like a lake or whatever, like I'd want it to like blend in. I'd make sure that it stays blended. A lot of natural colors and stuff like that. And then if I was living like off the East Coast somewhere, I'd probably have like those, homes on stilts type thing, I don't know. Like it probably would be fect or like if I lived overseas. Like what if like one day I got into an old castle? That'd be pretty good. That's more my vibe. Renovating a castle. I don't know. I would definitely go the way of taking like the bones of an old home and and renovating that rather than like just building a whole new home. I'd rather just renovate. That's kind of what I go for, I think. Like and so that makes the dream home thing a little bit like easier to conceptualize in my head where it's like, if I can find the right looking structure and I can kind of I can see myself being in it, then I can transform it, to the best abilities. I also hate kind of like when you're totally changing like the floor plan of a house. Like, I don't mind open concept spacing, like you can see through the house from the front door to the back door type thing. I don't mind that, but I do like having like hallways. I do like having cutoffs. It makes things feel, sectioned in a way. Like this is this part of the house and this is this part of the house. And I like that. You might knock out a couple walls that just seem kind of stupid, but I wouldn't be knocking out all these walls and making it just an open floor concept type thing. It just feels everything's like in one space. It feels like you're cooking in the kitchen, you can smell it in the living room. And it's like, that's not a bad thing, but I don't necessarily always want food, thinking up my nose or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Or like, I don't want like, or like, whatever, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? You guys get it. You guys are smart. But I think one day I would love to, like I said, just find like I'll find an old home. I don't mind that at all. Especially with like the thing in Japan, like I was talking about last episode, the IKEA, the whole empty house kind of thing. I'll dig on that, 100%. And they kind of push for that, keeping it kind of old school. And so I like that. You might have to update some of the facilities inside your house, like. And I would rather have I'd rather have like all new like plumbing and like better gas like lines and stuff like that. Good appliances rather than just like new walls and like a couple like a good paint job. Like I'd have a decrepit looking house if it meant the inside everything worked properly. Like I don't care. It's the functionality for me. I wouldn't build if I had millions of dollars, I wouldn't build a house that's like, this fantasy mansion. I'd build something that's like practical. Not a smart house, but something that like at every corner you go to or every room or every place you are, it's like everything you could want at that one time or everything you can need or use is in that one space. That's the dream. That's the dream. Or, I just walk out to my shed and it's right there too or something. Or, I want fresh herbs, it's my garden. I think about like practicality with my home. That's kind of my dream home is a super practical, home. I don't like, and not against anybody that likes the building the modern houses. And if you like the grays and the beiges, that's you. But that's not me. I can't say that I'm not basic at times. Like I said, I'll stick all black interior and all dark wood stains if that's like if that's what I can get. But I think I'm always promoting myself to try to, or trying to, tell myself I need to think outside my box, right? And as as a semi-creative person, like I realize that it feeds into my creativity. Like, I like darker gothicy things like that. So if it's in my house, like I'm gonna dig on it. You know what I'm saying? Then also sometimes I have fun with that super colorful maximalist stuff, and so I'm not against that either. And obviously, if down the road I'll have a wife and kids, so can't just decorate it how I want it if it's not effective for them. But yeah, I thought it was just kind of fun thinking about my dream house, Gunther's dream house. I'm gonna trump Barbies. Don't worry about it. It's gonna be better than Barbies. Whatever. But I think it's kind of fun to think about what my dream house might look like one day. In expressing ourselves or expressing something we believe, there isn't always a guarantee of being able to thoroughly share what we want to. We may be uncomfortable in sharing, or, through past bad experiences and expressing yourself, there is some sort of anxiety you might feel when explaining something. There is definitely a fear of being misunderstood as well, and that can often bring an insecurity in expressing some thoughts through the combination of concerns with sharing. Once you do choose to explain yourself, you might end up over explaining yourself. Over explaining is when you become excessive in your expression and may have a far bit of oversharing as well. A fair bit of oversharing as well, sorry. Maybe too many details or ones that don't matter. We can do our best to navigate the anxiety of expression and try to avoid doing too much. I think that's a big thing, like, especially when you're passionate or you just want to get out everything you know about something or all the thoughts you have, it's not going to be perfect. You might think that you're over explaining one thing or you're going to leave out something. So you're going to spend more time on that one thing. Excessive explaining more than necessary is what over explaining is to the T, right? It's that oversharing. And sometimes when you kind of have that oversharing, it doesn't always hurt. Some people don't mind that, but you might dive into like too many details, right? That's kind of the thing is like you start to kind of feed into something that you really didn't need to in general, and it can sometimes make you look a little bad. And I don't think it should say that you are bad and that because you couldn't explain something, properly and you did too much, that it's bad. But some people just might be turned off of from hearing you express yourself. You might also, accidentally throw in a couple of inappropriate details, not necessarily in the way of like, like grossly inappropriate, but like just things that just don't matter. Like things that literally didn't even need to be said and like that people can maybe even assume on their own. So I think there's multitude of ways. There's that anxiety, right? Really, that comes into over explaining. That's kind of the whole thing. Is like you get a little scared, and you just like you're expressing yourself, and you want to do your best. So anxiety builds up, and then you end up not doing what you had thought, or even if didn't have anything thought out, you kind of just eventually will start to miss things, and that all becomes kind of in retrospect. But why do we over explain? I think like a big thing, I think one of the big things is like fear of misunderstanding. I think like most people when they're expressing a thought that they have, especially when it's something that you want to try to express thoughts when when they're thought out, you know. You don't want to say things necessarily when it's half-assed. Sorry for my, my language. But sometimes that is part of expressing yourself is like you don't know something, so some might think about it, and so you throw the thought out there and you express yourself, trying to gain more information. But all within that like fear of being misunderstood. You just wanna be thorough, as most people do. And so like it's a very real thing. I know that when I'm talking and I get very passionate about things, and I just kind of get like my mouth moves a little quicker than my head sometimes. So like I just start going. Like my mouth will start kind of going and going. And next thing I know, I've just kind of not really said what I wanted to. Or like I've kind of talked for 10 minutes and not even gotten halfway through the argument or through the thing I was talking about. There's a definitely even like certain insecurities, maybe even, right? I think like when you maybe think that your idea is going to be taken a certain way, or like when you have like kind of a, you're not fully developed in a certain thought, when you express yourself and you share, there's going to be some sort of insecurity that someone's going to judge you on that. That they're going to say, well, you don't know anything. So, like, what are you saying that? Or, like, you don't want to sound, quote unquote, stupid or whatever, even though you're not necessarily, but, you might think that you're going to seem stupid. Or, like I said, maybe you've thought something thoroughly out and you just don't think people are going to be receptive to what you say. And so that definitely that makes you just hold it in. That brings that insecurity right in. And sometimes, you won't also like you won't get that validation, right? That's a big thing is like you want someone to when you express something and you express it with your best thoroughness, you want someone to like say, "Oh, that's a good thought," or like, "Oh, I understand." Sometimes it just doesn't happen, especially in the sense of over explaining. You're not always going to be able to have like someone validate you in that way. Or like you think you got a good opinion or you think you got a good thought, and maybe it is, but to the person or people you shared it with, they just don't accept it. They don't have that validation, if they don't say it's a good thought, doesn't mean it's not. Doesn't mean it's not a very real thought. It's just someone else or other people didn't accept it or whatever. And 100%, the over explaining and like just like a lack of even wanting to share can come from trauma and like a certain maybe gaslighting that comes with that trauma, right? In a way where because you maybe know something or because last time you brought it up, it just didn't end very well. And that could be like a varying thing. Like it could be like, someone actually physically harms you or you argue back and, in a sense of gaslighting, they make you seem like your opinion's stupid and theirs is like better or like that your opinion was totally unnecessary. So that leads to that anxiety. 100% that fear of expressing yourself and sharing anything, explaining anything. I think like you shouldn't let people, you know, turn down your thoughts unless it's in a very like logical situation, right? If someone's yelling back at you and they're just like playing off your thought, not understanding it, throwing it back at your face, then you shouldn't take that as in like, oh, well, my thought's stupid. It should just be, well, my thought's not accepted here. Because, truly the only way you're going to know if something you're, feeling in your head that you have a thought of, the only way you're going to know if it's real or if it's a good thought or anything about it is if you share someone who's willing to have that same conversation about it. Maybe has an opposing view or kind of has the same thinking as you do. It's I think not every time as though is like is bad intentioned. Things are just uncomfortable sometimes, truly. I don't think everything's like, it's not always a bad thing when you're over, to not want to share or when you over explain, it's not always a bad thing. It's just sometimes an uncomfortability thing. Not everybody's a speaker, I can talk in front of a few people, but I don't know if I would trip in front of large crowds, but I don't think I would be as thorough in front of large crowds. Or, if I was talking about my personal life to someone that didn't know anything about it, I might be a little tepid to share things. But if it's someone I trust and love, then I'm going to share everything, right? There's just some uncomfortable situations. You can't avoid those sometimes. And unfortunately, sometimes with over explaining, there will be consequences of over explaining. And like I said, not necessarily like in a bad way or like where you're a bad person for sharing, but there's just consequences in life to every natural factor that you go through. And so, maybe if you're sharing something and you're explaining something, someone might lose interest. They might like based off of what you're talking about and you're not talking about the things that they are interested or that feel like that can be grabbed in the conversation, they might lose that interest immediately or feel confused, right? Kind of maybe even linked together. If you feel confused, then you might lose interest. And that's inevitably a part of expressing yourself is you might turn around backwards and loop over a bunch of times and kind of like halfly say something, but you think you said something. Especially like I said, my mouth moves faster than my brain, so I skip over words. I'll skip through things 100%. I know that people have like lost interest in what I'm saying because of that. And I think in the same way, like when people I try to be receptive to over explaining, but when it becomes too confusing and I get lost, I kind of disconnect from that conversation. One thing I try not to never do is doubt the speaker's credibility though, which is something that a consequence of oversplaining is unfortunately some people, if they feel like they didn't get the stuff they needed out of you and you weren't doing your properness of explaining something or sharing something, they might doubt your credibility, even though you have it all thought out in your head and you've talked about it before, but just this one instant you just weren't able to explain it properly. So then you just are all of a sudden, you don't have any credibility to it. But also, like, what's that person doubting your credibility? What's their credibility? That's a big question too. Yeah, and 100%. Also, I think like a big thing is like losing clarity as you kind of talk and you ramble a little bit. You might catch yourself and you might say, "Oh, I don't really want to talk about that. I need to backtrack. Oh, wait, where did I go? Okay, I'll just start talking about da 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 da." That just kind of jumbles everything up. And then not only are you losing clarity in the way you speak to someone, but you might lose a little clarity in your own mind. You might not be able to process everything that you were just saying. And you lose track and repeat yourself and they don't want to hear you repeat it, or you just further skip along things that past things that you were originally trying to share and express. But I think it's a natural thing for everybody. I think there will always be situations where people will over-explain, not in a certain conscious effort of doing too much, but it's kind of an unconscious thing when it comes to over-explaining. When are certain passionate about something and you kind of start feeding into the expression, things just start to flow sometimes. And so you can't help but when you overshare, and I would rather overshare than not share at all at times. I mean, truly. I think sometimes I would I don't know. Sometimes holding myself back just makes it, harder in my head and it just makes me feel worse. So, vocalizing helps. And if I over explain, that's an unfortunate thing, but there's only so much I can do. I guess there are ways you can 100% avoid over explaining. I think, you could try to, identify certain triggers of over explaining, whether it's like, if the anxiety you feel, once you start to feel that anxiety, you take a second, you stop the conversation, you take that breath in and try to reassemble your thoughts. That's kind of a big thing. Another thing, like I think one a big thing is listen first, put the listener first kind of thing. Really try to take in as much, information as possible. Only in the case that you are the over explainer. If you know you are someone that over explains, then be a listener. If you don't really have that problem, then be fair. Talk and listen at a fair divide or a fair, you know, I don't know, allocation, whatever. But it's one of those things where like maybe if you listen to what someone else is saying and you listen to how they're saying it, maybe that helps with your expression, with what you're trying to say. Maybe. And very obviously, it's like the most obvious thing, I guess, really is like saying less, couple sentences at a time kind of thing. I think that's a big thing. If just try to hit the main key points, even if you feel that that it's kind of an underdone statement, you say something and you're like, well, I don't know if they're going to know what that means. Let them kind of ask that question. Throw in a couple, sequiturs to try to feed into the definition of what you just said and try to feed into defining. But like most of the times, people can be a little smarter than you think. And so you don't need to do all that explaining. You don't need to do all that sharing. People can kind of put in the blank spaces themselves. Also, a big thing is like focusing on the bottom line first. If you got something, the endpoint, you know what the endpoint is. Why not express that right off the bat? Why not just say like the big ending statement you have? And then, like I said, through the naturalness of listening to someone else, talking back to someone, then you might be able to best conversate on something and properly explain yourself rather than over explain. You might still over explain, but if you get that kind of major statement, you get the idea out there first, then I think that can help. And I don't know what necessarily like precise communication means, but trying to be just concise. Yeah, just trying to be direct with it. You don't have to, if it's something that you feel uncomfortable on saying, maybe don't say it. Or just say it and let it sit. Don't say, oh, well, da 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 da, maybe, da da da. You just kind of got to let it just say what you're going to say. Just spit out what you're going to say and just let it hang. People are going to react how they're going to react. I think that's just the naturalness of people and interactions with each other is like you can maybe one day say it this way and a couple days later say it a different way and it still might affect someone a certain way. You don't know necessarily. Also, a big thing is learning to sit in that discomfort. When you maybe say something, like I say, you're trying to be more concise and you want to say fewer things, so you might be more direct with something, and you don't have the lead up of explanation or the follow up of explanation. So you got to learn to say things and just kind of let it sit. And if it's not super profound and it's not super well received, excuse my voice crack, Jesus Christ, but if it's not super well received, you got to be able to sit in that discomfort just generally with people. I mean, you're not always going to be comfortable around everybody, so you got to learn to sit in that discomfort a little bit. And and also, okay, so I'm sorry, I was confusing myself. I had stuff right now. Ask if you are oversharing. I guess that's a pretty literal thing. If you feel like you kind of are doing too much and someone's reacting a certain way, just ask. I know I'm a pretty literal person. I wish people would just tell me things straight up so I don't have to like, think too much. I wish people would just tell me, if they don't like something, if they, think a certain way about me, I wish someone would just say it. So that's a big thing is like if I feel like I'm over explaining and I'm overdoing it, I'll say, I catch myself saying sorry and, is that too much, kind of thing. Did I say too much? Is that not what is that not good? I question myself in a lot. I think it sometimes keeps me from even explaining at all, which is unfortunate, but I think it's a big thing. It doesn't hurt to ask. Like I said, just being literal when you're explaining and expressing a thought, you want to be direct. You want to be literal. You want to try to do your best to hit all the points that you know you have. And, people are going to react a certain way. 100%. And if someone's not receptive to you, then don't always take that as in what you're thinking is, bad or it's, not credible. It may not be accepted in a certain scenario. But, in some things are just not that important too. I think that's a big thing to end on is that not every detail is important. Not all things you need to share, but don't be hurt to share things and just do your best to like when you want to express something, just try to think it through a little bit and just be a little more direct when you just start off with one statement. Say this, let the conversation ruminate and just see where it goes. I think we all are prone to over explaining once in a while or oversharing on certain thoughts. That doesn't make you a bad person. It just comes with a little bit of that anxiety on trying to do your best to be thorough in what you know. One of the funniest things I think when I'm watching like a movie is sometimes in like certain scenes, like randomly you'll see like a cameo from like a celebrity maybe who isn't a movie star, but it's sometimes exciting to see when like a major movie star or someone that you may not expect to be in a certain genre of film or be associated with a certain film, all of a sudden it kind of pops up and especially when it's like a kind of a weird character or it's just like totally out of left field, that can always be funny. Or if they play themselves, that could be good too. But I kind of love watching like, small cameos by kind of movie stars, by certain recognizable faces. I don't think it necessarily in some instances maybe, but it never really takes away from the movie. Sometimes it's just kind of they're just throwing it thrown in there and play a character. And so they're kind of part of the movie, but they're not part of the whole movie. And sometimes it's a celebrity. It's like them playing themselves, right? And that can be a little like out of left field and you could kind of say like, "Oh man, they're just trying to, do it because of this," or like, "Ah, of course they would." But most of the time I feel like it's done kind of tastefully. It's fun. It's usually like, friends with the director type thing or like, like maybe they were supposed to be in a movie but then scheduling happened but they're like, "Oh, but we can throw you in this one scene or I can do this one scene." I was reading an article by Yardbarker, and they were talking. They had a list of 20 major movie stars and small movie cameos. And so I thought that was kind of fun. I'm gonna kind of fly through the list a little quick, not super quick, because like I want to delve into some of them, but some of them I don't remember, like or I've never seen, or like haven't seen the movie maybe but one or two times, or never seen the movie. But it's like it's most of them I have. Like most of these are like I'm like yeah I can agree with that. But yeah, let's just hop into the list. I don't want to take up too much more time. But number one on the list, which is pretty good to start off with, is Bill Murray in Zombieland. He obviously plays himself. Pretty freaking funny. I literally think it's just one of the funniest scenes in that movie, and just the idea that like they're in the Hollywood Hills, they're looking for all these celebrities' houses, and they choose Bill Murray's house, and of course he would be alive, right? And like that whole shtick, like they're like hanging out, and he pretends to be the zombie on Columbus, and then gets shot and with Bill Murray timing, with the comedic timing that Bill Murray can have, it's just the perfect cameo. And then he pops back up in the second Zombieland double tap at like the end. There's like a little like ending sequence where he's doing like an interview for another Garfield movie. And then everybody turns into zombies, and then it's like a 5 minute clip of him just like crushing zombies. It's pretty good. But it was like perfect and just small enough to where you can get a little paycheck and be in a movie and keep relevant. Number two on the list is I thought it was funny. It's something from my childhood that I remember is Matt Damon in Eurotrip. Now I don't remember if it was at the end because it was like his Matt Damon plays a singer for a band, and if you ever heard that, Scotty doesn't know. Like, have you ever heard that song? That's from that movie. Now, as a kid, like it was believed that Matt Damon sang it. Obviously, now it's definitely like confirmed it wasn't Matt Damon. But just seeing like seeing him up on stage with like the buzzed head, right? Like the skinhead looking head, and just like dude, God. And Scotty's the main character and his girl and stuff like that. I think that's funny, and that kind of became a whole thing around Matt Damon. Is like I bet still till this day when he's walking down the street, Scotty doesn't know, and he's just like probably sick of it by now. He's like, I was in Good Will Hunting. I wrote that movie too. Dude, that was one from when I was a kid. I haven't really watched Euro Trip. It's not a movie. It's like I'd rather watch Road Trip than Euro Trip, even though they're not like associated necessarily. I'd rather watch Road Trip. Number three, one that I kind of forget about sometimes, even like that whole scene is kind of good. Is number three is Ben Stiller in Anchorman. Even when you think of that scene in general, it's Tim Robbins, right? Comes up, he's the one of the other anchors, and then Luke Wilson. You know what I'm saying? And then Vince Vaughn is Mantooth or whatever the hell. So I mean, like a couple good cameos, but Ben Stiller plays like the Hispanic like newscaster, and Ben Stiller's just funny, man. He literally put a costume on him and put a wig on or a mustache, and the guy gets lost in whatever part, and he's just so funny. And I think I love like the kind of double down in the second Anchorman with all the cameos. You know what I'm saying? And so it's better in the second one, but that first one was so funny. And just I think with like Tim Robbins, that's pretty random. Luke Wilson, pretty random, but it's funny nonetheless. It's just like quick. He's not a main character. It's just quick. Number four, they had Johnny Depp in 21 Jump Street, which if you didn't know, at the beginning of his career, he was on that TV show 21 Jump Street. And so the fact that he like comes back and he does like a little bit part like that. He plays like a undercover detective or undercover cop or whatever is perfect. It literally like kind of feeds back into the 21 Jump Street kind of family, the whole lore, spanning all those years. And he got to wear prosthetics. So I mean, like I'm sure he was having fun. He likes to dress up too. It's just like that little slick, a little blink to the camera type thing, a little wink to the camera where it's like, hey, we got him in here. He's here. He's in 21 Jump Street. 21 Jump Street is in 21 Jump Street. Just a nice little cameo, I think. Perfect, like just perfect little one. Number five, it's funny, but it does kind of throw me through a loop. Number five, they have David Bowie in Zoolander. He comes up for the walk off. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's funny. I'm not gonna lie. It's not like it's not funny, and he's so charismatic, and I kind of like the whole like, he kind of I'll do it, and takes off the glasses, and it's David Bowie, and I just like that. And Obviously, it's a good scene. It's a funny scene with the underwear, and David Bowie's just like, like sticks his head underneath the legs, disqualified. Okay, it's good. It's just it's small, and David Bowie gets to be David Bowie, which is more exciting than any character he's ever played. Number six, this one's maybe a little hidden for people my age. Is Martin Sheen in Hot Shots Part Deux. I don't speak French, but it's Hot Shots Part Two. There's like a scene. So Charlie Sheen is the main like character in both Hot Shots, and there's a scene in the second Hot Shots, and they're parodying Apocalypse Now. So they're both like you see Charlie Sheen is like going down the river in his boat, and then Martin Sheen is coming down the other way in his boat, and they give the thumbs up, and they I loved you on Wall Street, I think is what they say. Yeah, but it's pretty funny. It's father and son, and it's parodying, Apocalypse Now, one of the greatest movies of all time. And it's just so, that part, the Hot Shots Part Two is parodying like all kind of war movies that were coming out in the late '70s, early '80s. Like he's supposed to be like Rambo, basically, right? And then he has like there's like that whatever yada yada. The first movie rips off Top Gun, but it's funny nonetheless. And I think it's just like it's that quick little cameo. I love father son cameos. I think that stuff's funny. And it's just perfect. Number seven, which is one that I found out a few years ago, but it's a movie that I've loved for so long, is Kate Blanchett in Hot Fuzz. And it's like you kind of think you're like, I don't think I've ever seen her face, like anybody that looks like her in that movie. Well, she's in the beginning at that like scene when Nicholas goes to the crime scene and he goes to see his girlfriend. His girlfriend is played by Kate Blanchett. Janine, I think, is her name, and they like break up or whatever. But like if you go back and watch the movie and you see her like see her eyes, you're like, oh yeah, that's Kate Blanchett. That's like the crystal blue eyes, incredibly beautiful eyes, and then the voice too. You can kind of make out. I mean, to be Kate Blanchett. But I mean, that's pretty quick little cameo. I don't know how. Obviously, I don't know who she knows. Who did you know around here, Kate? Don't come in my movies. Don't come in the Cornello trilogy like that, and just not stay around. It's okay. We got Rosamund Pike in the third installment, The World's End, so I'm okay with that. Number eight on the list is Mark Hamill in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. He also was in the reboot movie. He plays, oh man, he plays the supervillain that's like, oh god, um, I forget the supervillain's name. I'm stupid. It's such a classic movie and definitely 100% a movie that I've seen, but I just can't remember what his character's name. He plays some like dumb supervillain, but it's perfect. It's Mark Hamill. I mean, it's Luke Skywalker. And I think a lot of people like as he got a little older, he wasn't on camera as much. So to see him then pop up in this Strike Back and then years later in the reboot was awesome. He's known for his voice, I think, or like, being Luke Skywalker. And then if you watch the Batman animated series in the 90s, then he's your Joker. You would have known. So like it was just cool to see his face at the time. I feel very ashamed for not remembering. I should have wrote it down. I told myself to write it down, but I just couldn't for some reason. The next one, number nine, it's another movie that I don't remember much, but Orson Welles in the Muppet movie. I think he plays like he doesn't play a voice. I know he plays like himself. I think, or maybe like a studio executive. I think. Oh gosh, everybody's gonna come for me. Orson Welles, guy's classic, Citizen Kane. Watch it. Probably my dad's favorite movie, maybe one of his favorite movies. Orson Welles is amazing. The man was a very talented guy, withstood the test of time, and just kind of interesting to see him thrown randomly in the Muppet movie. But everybody loves the Muppets, and everybody loves Sesame Street. So I would do a Muppet movie, 100%. If you yeah, when the Muppets come a knocking, you don't turn it down. You go for that nice little check. That um, what channel? PBS was that when the Muppets were on and Sesame Street? You ain't gonna turn down that check. Number 10 on the list they had is Charlton Heston in Wayne's World 2, which was pretty good. I he's in it's another throwaway scene. It's the scene when Wayne is trying to go after Cassandra, and he like stops at the gas station and he talks to the gas station attendant, and he's given like the monologue, but he's not doing it so well. And so they replace the actor in the middle of the scene, and it's Charlton Heston. and he gives like this excellent obviously this excellent monologue, and Wayne's like crying, thank you, and then he runs off without getting gas. But that's another just quick. It's another kind of like even kind of a wink to say like, hey, this we got superstars, we got legends, like it's just funny. Wayne's World always kind of does that. They throw random people in these random bit parts, and it's always funny. I mean, it's always good. Number 11, I've never watched the full movie, and I don't remember. Number 11, they had Hulk Hogan and Gremlins 2. I don't remember. I could probably watch Gremlins 2 maybe a handful of times and never completely the way through. So I don't remember Hulk Hogan. We'll just skip on that one. Number 12, they had Dustin Hoffman in The Holiday. I think that one deserves a little because I didn't know, and so I had to go back and watch the clip from The Holiday, and he's just in a movie store. He's just like Jack Black is grabbing The Graduate, I think, or grabbing a movie that has Dustin Hoffman in it, and like Dustin Hoffman like turns and like kind of gives like looks at him and then just kind of like looks away or whatever. He doesn't even have to get dressed up for it. I think he's wearing like a sweatsuit basically. But I mean, like I don't turn down a Dustin Hoffman cameo at all, and especially like in a movie like The Holiday, which is it's a feel good movie. Throw a feel good actor in there. Number 13, I'll try to get through the rest quickly. Number 13 on the list, they had Glenn Close in Hook, which I think that one's a little bit, like I said, sometimes cameos are playing another character, right? But she is so taken away from like Glenn Close. She plays a guy. She plays Scruggs or whatever the pirate's name, but he gets like it's like the one Dustin Hoffman literally is like he like kills him or whatever. He's like the one like it's like right at the beginning, he's getting maimed for something and he gets like hung up on like the big like banisters or whatever. I think maybe I'm misremembering Hook, but I know for a fact that Glenn Close is that pirate, which is pretty awesome. Apparently Glenn Close she don't mind gender bending like that. He's done it a couple times in movies and quite talented at it. And also, if you want to know something interesting about Glenn Close, she grew up in a cult. So go look that up. Sorry, excuse me. For number 14, it had Sarah Michelle Gellar, and She's All That. Now, I don't know, I don't really remember She's All That. I know it's Freddie Prinze Jr. Um and Rachel Cook, I think, right? Is that who's in She's All That? So I think the whole Sarah Michelle Gellar cameo, I think it was more so like like right when she started type thing. I think that's what the whole like movie stars as small cameos is like. She eventually like obviously became famous through Buffy and all these things, but this was like right at the beginning of her career. And also with Freddie Prinze Jr., right? Isn't that like I said? Isn't that She's All That? Am I tripping on that? Whatever. You guys can't respond to me. Number 15 is Madonna in Die Another Day, James Bond movie. She plays like a weapons specialist or something like that. Lily pops up in one scene. We'll skip over that. Number 16, this one blew up the internet by storm when it came out, was Brad Pitt in Deadpool 2. It was like it's literally if you blink, you miss it type thing. It's like he plays the invisible man or whatever, the invisible superhero that like comes in on the parachute, then hits the electrical lines. And the only time you see Brad Pitt's face is when he's getting electrocuted. It just like shows it real quick. So not much of a cameo, barely a cameo if you ask me. But it blew up. Everybody was like, "Oh my God, Brad Pitt's in the movie. Where?" Got everybody to rewatch it though. Just saying. Huh. Number 17. It's another one that I'm sorry I should have done a little more research. The number 17 is Walter Houston in the Maltese Falcon, the 1941 version. I think he played the original Maltese Falcon in like the 30s version. But I know that the 1941 Maltese Falcon is like the definitive Maltese Falcon. It was during that time period when like every 5 years Hollywood would just like remake like a redo a certain like character. Like it's why you got like all the Universal monsters like a bunch of times and a bunch of actors playing them, and so it's like it's just a character type thing, and so I think people were excited to see him pop up. I think that's what it is. I can't really remember, or he played it on like the radio. I wish I would have done a little more with that, but I know the Maltese Falcon. And like I said, I know the 1941 version is like the definitive version or whatever. Number 18 on the list, a couple more. I'll throw these ones actually back to back. 18 and 19 are both from Austin Powers Gold member, and it's Tom Cruise and Gwyneth Paltrow. I think that's funny. Just have them back to back. They were in that like mock trailer in the beginning of Austin Powers Goldmember, and it's just great. I mean, like they have that big action scene, and of course it's Tom Cruise, and then Gwyneth Paltrow. I mean, she's very beautiful and very talented at that time, and famous at that time. But I will talk about the other cameos in a second. Like I kind of threw them in my like my extras second X section. But it's like that whole opening has just stars upon stars, which I'll talk about in a second. But I think it's just perfect. I think literally like I bet it was like Mike Myers was like, if I can pick one person to play me in a real action, Austin Powers would be Tom Cruise type thing. And I'm sure it just worked out like that. Thankfully, Tom Cruise has, I think people don't think he has like a certain sense of humor, but I think Tom Cruise gets it. I really do. Um, Last on the list though, for number 20 is Dan Aykroyd and Casper. It's like it's in that scene when they're trying to run the ghost out and they're bringing in all the different like ghost hunters, and he plays a Ghostbuster theoretically. I don't think he has like the symbol on, but he's got the uniform, he's got the like proton pack. It's he's a Ghostbuster, and he gives the line. He's like, who are you gonna call? Somebody else. And so of course you got to throw that line in if Dan Aykroyd is playing a Ghostbuster. You gotta have that line in. But I remember that one as a kid, 100%. And like I didn't know I would have saw Casper before I saw Ghostbusters. Sorry, it's just my timing of my childhood. But obviously, it's like as I got older, it's like it's fun. It's like a good tongue in cheek thing. But I think all those are pretty good examples, truly, really good examples. Just 20 that they had. I mean, that's a lot, and I mean, I've been talking for a minute now. But I'm gonna throw in a couple ones that I thought were pretty good. That I every time I see, I think are pretty funny. I'll continue on with the Austin Powers Gold member. And I mean, like, Kevin Spacey, Danny DeVito, John Travolta, Steven Spielberg, Quincy Jones, Britney Spears are all in that opening sequence. You dig? So it's like, or John Travolta doesn't pop up until like the end or whatever, like when they're watching the movie, right? Excuse me. But all these actors, literally, they spent a fair budget on that opening, but it really kind of draws you in and it makes you kind of feel good about that movie. And like I said, I love Kevin Spacey being Doctor Evil. I love Danny DeVito as Mini Me, and John Travolta, doing his Gold member. I love it. I don't care. I don't care. And Steven Spielberg, like I said, Quincy Jones, Britney Spears. It's pretty awesome. Going back to Anchorman, in Anchorman, Jack Black, he plays the biker. He's like at the uh um uh freaking Ron Burgundy throw. Sorry, I couldn't think of his name. Threw the sandwich out the window and it hits the biker, right, the motorcyclist, and it's Jack Black, and he like grabs the dog and he grabs Baxter, and kicks him off the bridge, dude. Come on, Jack. But yeah, I laugh at that part every time, and it's just like such a quick cameo. It's so freaking quick, and it's like Jack. It's Jack Black. I mean, you can't not love Jack Black. Going back to, I guess I'll throw in both actually. For Wayne's World 1 and 2, they had two different musicians, famous musicians. In the first one they had Alice Cooper, and then the second one they had Steven Tyler. And I think that's cool. I mean, it's worth, especially Alice Cooper. I love Alice Cooper. I grew up listening to Alice Cooper. So he's always been a great in my childhood. And I love the whole, like, actually it's pronounced Milwaukee, which is Algonquin for the good land. And that whole shtick, and then like, we're not worthy. And he's like sticking out his hand, like, oh my God, I love Alice Cooper. And also he pops up in Dark Shadows, which is funny. It's he's supposed to be himself from the past, but he's like obviously modern day. I'll throw in a couple more. Neil Patrick Harris and Harold and Kumar. If you don't love Neil Patrick Harris and Harold and Kumar, then you're not a fun person. You're not funny. You have no sense of humor, man. It's the ultimate like point the middle finger at the stereotype of like child stars, like celebrities going off the rail, and he's the ultimate parody of himself. Just this drugged out, super into girls, like living off that Doogie Howser fame, like dude. And he's the whole. I just love that. And then at the end, he brings the car back, and he's like, "Sorry, there's some love stains in the back." And you're like, "God dang it, Neil!" You're like, "Golly!" And he pops up in each one. He pops in the second one and the third one too. You can't get rid of him. And I think it adds to it. It doesn't take away from it. He's only super funny in it, and he plays himself too. Like that's what makes it even funnier. A super vamped version of himself. I'll do one more. Let's see. I have a couple more written down, but I'll do one more. Um, I'll do Christopher Walken in Pulp Fiction. I it's you get a great actor like that in a movie, you can make him do any part, right? He's such a Christopher Walken can do anything, he really can. But what do we get him to do in a great movie like Pulp Fiction? Well, we get to tell him, give him a story to tell about a watch that he held onto a friend that he had shoved up his ass. Yeah, let's just do that. It's just he's telling a little kid that this watch he's about to give over was shoved up someone's ass for multiple years or whatever there was. I'm sorry. But just the way that Christopher Walken gives it and like the way he's so dead serious about it, talking about that, it's so good. And Christopher Walken, like I said, he can do anything. So you give him a story about a watch being shoved up someone's butt and it's gonna be funny. But yeah, those are just a few. Like I know there's a bunch of others and like some good ones, other musicians, athletes, actors, martial artists, you know what I'm saying? There's tons of good things. And like I said, I love watching movies and when I get to see that little cameo from someone from a movie star, someone that I really enjoy, it's always awesome. Alrighty, friends. That's really all I have to say about that. Episode 43 done. I appreciate everybody for tuning in as always. If you want to listen to this episode or any of my past episodes or any future episodes, I always upload them on YouTube and Spotify as well. If you find anything I say relatable or enjoyable in any way, then I always appreciate a little support. You can, subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. You can follow me on Spotify. You can also follow me on a few different social medias. I have Instagram, I also have a Facebook, and then I also have Twitter. But nonetheless, I appreciate everybody for stopping by as always. I really truly, I truly enjoy getting a chance to talk on the microphone and I got all these, podcasts kind of planned out and I'm trying to get ahead as much as possible and it's making it a little easier for me to like to talk and feel like I'm not like, rambling too much and, I want to ramble a little bit, but just trying to be as thorough as possible and feel like that I'm actually like doing my due diligence with my podcast. But yeah, I love y'all. Don't forget to tell someone else you love them as well. Make sure to show up for yourselves every single day and be excellent to each other.